Do-it-yourselfers, today's project is in the Honda E2000i, of which I've had many. This one here, have completely disassembled. It had a problem, a very simple problem, of the fan broke. This isn't the broken fan. This one came out of another unit. The fan broke, the unit was new. We're not really sure why it broke. But one of the problems is now it has bent valves. Pistons hit valves. That should not have happened. We're not really sure why, but the fact of the matter is the valves are stuck open. So we are now going to repair this unit, which was relatively new. Typically the cost of parts, if you get a deal on them online, is $450. And with the labor, you end up spending almost as much as it costs for a new one. Problem is you don't have a warranty, therefore it's not worth doing. But this thing has low hours on it, and therefore the rings are not worn out, the piston is not worn out, the belt failed, and therefore we're going to rob the valves, these guys right here, from this unit, which has a lot of miles on it. So this one here did not fare so well. Actually, it lasted for a long time until it finally just gave up the ghost. So this one here is worn out completely. Doesn't run, burns oil. This one here still runs fairly well, or did, until the belt failed. We have a new belt. We're going to put a new belt on it. First, we're going to replace these valves, which is very simple on these, or should be. You just push down on these valve keepers and they come off and the valves come out. And we know this one has the issue of bent valves, and so we are going to replace them. I'm going to try to keep all the parts some semblance of order. Intake valves separate from exhaust, etc. All right. There you have it. Step 2, we've gotten our valves out and inspected them, and we've put our valve grinding material on the exhaust valve after cleaning all the carbon deposits off, which we haven't done on the intake yet, but the intake is a lot less than the exhaust because, you know, the exhaust. So to lap the valves in, you can barely see it in there. There it is. We've taken a piece of hose. We put some valve grinding material. I'm not advocating the use of Permatex valve grinding compound, but it certainly has worked for me. So we stuck the valve in the hole with a little bit of valve grinding material, which you can hear the grit, and put a piece of hose over the valve stem. And I put this clampy doodad in the form of a, you can see it there, zip tie on the hose so that I can sit here and work this back and forth. And I'm going to use both hands, but I can't do with the camera. And so you get the idea in terms of you pulling down on this carefully so you don't jerk it off, and lapping those valves. You'll be doing that to both valves. I should add that this whole thing may end up being an exercise in futility, but what it really is an attempt at an experiment in self-reliability. If you've got a bunch of these things laying around in pieces that are, been used to hell, it's nice to have a backup, if you can make one, out of the parts. But this is so shade tree. In fact, there's the shade tree right there. When you live out here in the woods, you have things like, a pellet-powered pizza oven, a Coleman stove, a shed, your barbecue, and you do things like this. Try to see if the S hits the F that you can survive. And right now there's no power in California, which is another whole story, and I think it's a big scam, thanks to all the bleeding heart liberals. There you go. Left our valves, they're back in there. You just push down on these and slide them. It's really simple. They're in. This is, like I said, very shade tree. There's the shade tree. And yeah, we're getting ready to put this back together. We move this crank out of the way. We don't knock it off. Next is our piston. We've scraped the carbon off. going to compress these rings very carefully, not with a ring compressor because shade tree. So there's a chamfered edge here that we're going to carefully use to set the rings back in place to go back into the bore. There's the bore. And you better lube this stuff if you're going to put it back together so it has a chance of survival. This piston is not in bad shape, surprisingly, for the miles that are on it. And we're going full synthetic on this. Full synthetic. 1030, you know, not really what you should be using. It should be 30 weight, but for assembly, it's going to be fine so that you can see it. Not easy. I'm pressing the rings with the chamfer. Okay, now we're going to add more oil just to make sure this thing is lubricated. Because you can never have too much lubrication. Okay, now I put the crank in. This is somewhat difficult. It has to line up proper, which is not going to do. So we'll reset this. Just set it on top of its case for the minute. And then we're just going to set this down in here very carefully. Try to get it underneath the piston, where it just drops in, allegedly, which it may be. Kind of might be. Nope, we got to seat that bearing down in there. So I'll be fussing about with that. Okay, it's in there. Now we'll just kind of seat that piston. And then we have the cap with the oil slinger. Goes there. 2 bolts. That hold that cap on. And we'll torque those and test. Okay, it's working. That's torqued in there. Next is the belt. You line up this mark with that mark, then you slide in the belt. And the belt is a brand new belt. All this stuff, you can download the manual, various different places on the internet, for the absolute descript methods on how to do this. But I'm going to just hash through it. They tell you to install the letters upside down. So you stick the belt in the hole. It goes over the pulley. There's the letters upside down. Goes on there. Then to put the cam in, which is over here. We will now stand it up to be able to do that. But you basically slide it down in there. You line it up so that those 2 marks there are even with the top of the thing, as long as that hasn't moved, which it already has. And then you're good. Otherwise, you slide the belt back off and you just pull the pin in and out of here to loosen this, where you can move it around and rotate it. We're lined up there. Here's our cam. Its timing marks are lined up there. And then we're just going to pull against this belt and slide the pin in. It's quite simple, really. You should oil it up. Ours is dirty. We'll wipe it. Try to do this with one hand to hold the camera. Okay, our hash marks are aligned. This one is still aligned here. We're good. And then you put in the rockers. They just go right in here. See if I can figure out how to prop this thing up. All right. And you have your valve adjustments here, which we'll have to do. It's all in the book though. This one obviously goes here, so you pull the pin out. You slide the rocker in there. Push the pin back in. It's supposed to be easy. There's a lot of clearance. Not as much as there was when that valve was stuck. Next one. Pin out. Rocker in. Pin in. Oi! It'd be much easier if I had two hands. But remember, shade tree. That's better than it was. There was a lot of clearance there before. All right, there it is. Now I put the cover back on. There's the cover. I have to clean this crap off of it first though, the sealer. These things get some sealer. That's all there is on these. There's no gasket. There's a little tiny little rubber thing in here. I hope you didn't lose. It seals to the plastic shroud. But this basically will go on like that. 4 bolts and done. And then we assemble the rest of the generator. It's this guy. Goes on here. And then there's all these bolts. La-dee-doo-dee-da, 1 through whatever, around there. Then we work on the generator side. Don't forget the goo around here. Torqued, we put back in our generator and our little ignition pulse generator. This is what fires the ignition. Something that needs to be tested if your ignition doesn't work. And then you make sure the woodruff key is in. Then you put in the rotor, and you better be careful because this has really powerful magnets and it will pinch your fingers and hurt you. Okay. Line up the key, get your fingers out of the way. When it goes, it goes. That's not lined up correctly. Good thing my finger wasn't in the way.
So does the Pee-wee work okay?
Yeah. Alright, next you need a strap wrench. I got this one from Kragen when it was Kragen. I don't know what they're called now. But you wrap this around here. To tighten this so you can hold this while you turn that. You might have to remove that to get the wrench in there, although it doesn't look like it. So you get your strap wrench on here. This is the way that Honda tells you to do it. I don't know what the torque spec is, but tight, because we're shade tree. So I'll show them the tree. Shade tree. Shade tree mechanism. That's what's going on here. And cut. Clean it first and get all this crud out with solvent. My favorite is gasoline. No, you're not supposed to use it. It's extremely dangerous. But we're shade tree. So clean that shit. Clean shroud on here, but not before we put on the fan and the recoil mechanism. Goes on here, then that goes on there, and then that goes on there, and then it should go back in there. We've got to clean that shit up too though. And then it should work.